Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar in the second phase of the Aging with HIV project of the European AIDS Treatment Group. My name is Tamás Bereczky. I'm a researcher in social sciences and the communications officer of the EATG. Over a span of about 30 months, we cover all life stages of a person born, growing up, and growing old with HIV, including epidemiological, medical, biological, social, and psychosocial aspects. Today, we shall talk about children and adolescents living with HIV. Our three speakers will cover various areas of the topic. Otilia will talk about global and EU epidemiological data. Nigel will talk about PENTA, the Pediatric European Network for the Treatment of AIDS. And we shall have Anna, which is not her real name, a young person from Romania who will share her personal experience, what it means or what it meant to grow up and live with HIV. What I suggest is that we shall listen to the presentations first and then have a questions and answers session. So please reserve your questions for the end of the webinar. You can also type your questions into the comment box on your screen next to the presentation field on the bottom, which then I will relay to the speakers. So please make sure that your microphones are muted when you don't speak to avoid any background noise. And with this, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Otilia Mårdh, who is a medical doctor and also a scientist, a researcher. She works for the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, ECDC. She's been there since 2011 as a scientific officer for HIV and AIDS, STIs, and hepatitis. She also contributed to a huge number of projects within the ECDC and also outside, and has an impressive list of publications about topics of HIV, hepatitis B, syphilis, rubella. So, Otilia, take it away. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Tamás. I want to say hello to everybody and to express myself being very honored to present today in this webinar. My presentation will start with one slide with a global picture about HIV diagnosis among children and adolescents. And this is based on a recent UNAIDS report showing the data for 2014, when an approximate number of 220,000 children were diagnosed with HIV globally, and most of them, 86%, were diagnosed in sub-Saharan Africa. In the map presented here from UNAIDS report, there are estimates of where the 2 million adolescents living with HIV are located in the world, and we can also see that most of them, 82%, they live in sub-Saharan Africa. Another figure which I would like to mention to you is that among the total new HIV diagnoses in 2014, 12% were among adolescents. I will start now with my presentation about the European Union data situation, and I would like to say that ECDC is covering this area of 31 member states, which amounts for around 500 million population, of which almost 91 million are adolescents below and 19 years old. In 2014, which is the year with the most recent HIV surveillance data available, we recorded a number of 786 new HIV diagnoses among people 0 to 19 years old, and these are 3% of the total of almost 30,000 new HIV reports. For a period of 10 years, between 2005 and 2014, we had, however, recorded more than 9,000 HIV diagnoses in this age group. And as you can see in the graph, which is to the right-hand side, we see that in this period, the percentage of HIV diagnosis among children diagnosed and adolescents has been always below 3%. In my presentation, I'd like to cover a few questions, and these are to present which are the main mode of transmission in EU for children and adolescents, which are the trends and some of the demographic characteristics and public health implications. I will start with the slides where all the cases we have recorded for this 10 years period are divided by 3 age groups and by mode of transmission. And we can see that the very young age groups like 0 to 4 and 5 to 15 years old, they were infected predominantly through mother-to-child transmission. On the other hand, the adolescents, 15 to 19 years old, they were exposed to sexual transmission. Those who are in the blue color are adolescents infected through sex between men, and those in green are adolescents infected through heterosexual men, both boy and girls. Here I have a slide representing the trends of HIV diagnosis in this 10 years period. And we can see that there are several good news. The vertical transmission, the heterosexual transmission are decreasing, but in the same time we can see that actually there is a increasing line of transmission through MSM sex. In the next slide, I separated the adolescents 15 to 19 years old by their region of origin. Some of the diagnoses in this population in EU are among people who are born in the EU countries, and some others were not born. They are foreign born. They may come from different parts of Europe or from parts of the world. So in the left-hand side, we can see actually a kind of zoom in into what's going on, what is the predominant mode of transmission and the trend in the adolescents who are born in EU. And we can see that actually this blue line, which represents transmission through sex between men, is actually more steep, is more actually accelerating, going up. For the foreign-born cases, I will have a slide later on. But now I would like to actually present you a kind of mapping where the HIV diagnosis occur in which country, and you can see here that actually on the left-hand side we can see the different countries have different numbers of HIV diagnosis among adolescents, and on the right-hand side we can see what is the predominant mode of transmission by country, and we can also see reflected here the blue color, which is MSM sex, and in the green we can see the heterosexual transmission among these young people that become infected in EU-EA area. As Tamás mentioned, I worked very much in the recent year on understanding and describing the trends of mother-to-child transmission of HIV in EU-EA countries, and this in order to understand the effectiveness of antenatal screening program in European Union. In this slide, I constructed a line for the 30 years period of reported data. We have here a total of 6,270 diagnoses of HIV MTCT cases in European Union countries, and they are separated in blue and green by the place of origin. In blue, we have those cases that were born in EU countries, and in green we have those cases that were diagnosed in EU countries, but they were born abroad, and they were likely infected when they were in their native countries, but they were assessed as MTCT when they were diagnosed in our region. Let's keep a look on this blue line, which are the cases of vertical transmission which happened in European Union countries. And we have here a kind of trend, and we can see that the first diagnosis started to increase in the late 1990s and plateaued in the 1990s and early 2000s. Here I also constructed a curve which describe the same cases by their year of birth. So in the red line, we have actually the same cases, but they describe the year of probable transmission, the year when vertical transmission occurred, and because of this, we can estimate actually what was the trend of vertical transmission in the European Union, and we can see that actually the vertical transmission started to increase, as I said before, in the late 1980s and plateaued until 2003, and then started to decrease continuously until the recent year. We go further, and we can have here this line of transmission separated by countries, and I only have here the 5 countries that contributed with most of the MTCT reports, and we can see the first peak represented by mother-to-child transmission in Romania in the late 1980s, and then we have the green trend line, which represents the MTCT cases in United Kingdom, and then we have the other lines, which are the other countries with a relatively high number of cases. If we go further, in this slide, I try to use the estimated number of MTCT cases by their year of birth, reported to the total number of live births in that country. And here we have the figures for the most recent 5 years of reporting. And we can see that between 2010 and 2014, we had a total of 274 HIV transmission from mother to child in EU/EA countries. And if we report this to the total number of births in this period, we find that the rate was 1 case per 100,000 live births, which is indeed very low. It's a very low mother-to-child transmission rate overall. But we can see from the map that there are still some hot areas, regions, countries in Europe, and this coincides with the Southeast and also with the Baltic states. The countries which are in this map in green are those countries which during this interval they had no mother-to-child transmission, so they performed very well. What I have here, I'm sorry for this, what I have here is the slide which I promised to you before about the foreign-born cases. During this 30 years time, we had a total number of more than 2,800 cases of mother-to-child transmission in persons who are born abroad. And you can see here in the green line that most of the cases came from sub-Saharan African countries and less from other parts of the world, reflecting obviously the high-level epidemic in sub-Saharan Africa. Anyway, to understand this trend requires also to describe the trends in migration to European countries. My last slide is about a summary of the findings and some of the public health implications. And I would like to summarize saying that HIV infections among young people in European Union is low. Like less than 3% of all new diagnoses yearly. However, there are some subpopulations that are likely at higher risk And as I told before, it is mainly about the young MSM. In the same time, I also want to emphasize that European Union member states perform well in respect of antenatal screening because, as we can see, the rate of mother-to-child transmission is very low, very low, and below the WHO target, which is 50 transmission to 100,000 live births. However, the situation is not uniform, is not the same everywhere. There are still countries where antenatal screening has to be enforced and strengthened, and we identified through a recent report, which is available for everybody to read online on our website. There are some barriers for effective antenatal screening, and there are some subpopulation of mothers who are at risk of transmitting the infection to the newborn. And for this, because we want to support the countries to address this remaining challenges, we will try to develop and publish soon a guidance that actually is trying to address these barriers. My last idea is, and my last reflection is about the young adolescent MSM, and they are obviously at increased risk for transmission and HIV infection, and they actually are following the general trend of increasing trends of HIV infections among MSM in European population. And there is a need for targeted prevention strategies, for youth-friendly policies and prevention and healthcare services to attract to testing and to care this population now at risk. In 2015, ECDC published a guidance where we have several recommendations which are for the policymakers and for those who work in HIV prevention to consider when they work in STI and HIV prevention among MSM. This was my presentation, and I would like to thank you for attention and to everybody who contributed with data for this presentation to be possible.
Thank you, Otilia. This was really, really very interesting. I think it's very challenging to listen to what you said about all the differences across Europe, even though we tend to believe that the European Union is more or less unified. Yet it isn't, and I think it makes sense to park this question and this issue for future discussion.
I'm very happy to take questions later on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Our next speaker is Nigel Klein, who's a professor and consultant in pediatric infectious diseases and immunology at Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital in London and the Institute of Child Health, University College of London. Nigel will talk about PENTA, the European Network of Pediatric AIDS, or Pediatric European Network of AIDS, which is one of the very exciting and successful initiatives going on in Europe about pediatric HIV and AIDS. Nigel also has an impressive list of publications. All of that you can find on our website on agingwithhiv.com. And without further ado, take it away, Nigel.
Thank you very much for that, and it's a pleasure to talk today. I represent a very large organization, and what I'm really going to tell you about is how this came about, what we've been doing, and where we're going in the future. I don't seem to have a control of how to do the next slide on my... there. So we started, when I first started working with children with HIV, there was no network across Europe for looking after patients with this condition. And we realized it was rare at that time, and so we set up a collaboration largely driven by Diana Gibb and Carlo Giaquenta from Italy, who established a European network, which we called PENTA, or the Pediatric European Network for Treatment of AIDS. And initially, we just shared ideas and experiences because we really didn't have any experience at that time about what was happening with these children and how best to manage them. But quite rapidly, we started to recognize that if we came together more formally and we started to put together some projects, then we could move the field forward. And so that's exactly what we did. We started setting up clinical trials. We put our cohorts together. We started looking into pregnancy studies, doing some basic science work, and we started training the next generation of doctors in handling HIV. We managed to get substantial funding from what was then the European Commission, but we also got a buy-in from the Medical Research Council in the UK and INSERM ANRS in France. And over the years, we've had collaborations and funding through the United States with the NIH, a number of Italian organizations, particularly Italian National Institute of Health, and various pharmaceutical companies have been very helpful in helping to support us. In fact, the organization was so successful that we realized we had to put it on a different footing. And so in 2004, we developed the PENTA Foundation, which is a legal organization, and it's based in Italy. And as a foundation, it's been able to drive a number of research areas and clinical areas, some of which I'll touch on in my subsequent slides. Now, of course, once we had set up this network, and you'll see how extensive it is very shortly, it also became apparent to us that we could use this network to investigate other areas, in particular other infections. And so in 2012, we expanded PENTA to become the PENTA-ID network, which has been very successful in getting funding to perform a number of studies across all age groups, addressing areas such as antimicrobial resistance, optimal antimicrobial therapy, and a number of pharmacokinetic studies. Again, I'll touch on a few of these shortly. We realized that as we've been going really since 1991, we've now developed quite a lot of expertise in a number of areas. And I think particularly we've become very good at running international research projects. In last year, we decided that the foundation is very good at doing non-profit making studies, but we are also very keen to try to rapidly introduce new therapies for pediatrics. And as many of you will know, this has been a major headache for us because the system as it stands is very, very unwieldy and slow at getting pediatric formulations into clinical practice. And so in 2015, we developed a spin-off company called PENTA-ID Innovation, and the idea behind that is that we can try and speed up some of the regulatory studies that are required to introduce such data into the pediatric pharmaceutical domain, and without having to make it non-profit making. And so PENTA-ID is a new concept, and we've really just in its infancy. So this is just shows you the timeline from 1991 with the foundation, establishment of the foundation, the expansion to other areas of infectious diseases, and the new spin-off organization called PENTA-ID Innovation. Now, you can see here how extensive the network is now. So we have most countries in Europe are involved, as well as a number of countries outside Europe, including in South America, the United States, and in Asia. And with this network, it's really allowed us to move ahead on a number of studies. Now, I don't want to bore you with all the studies that we've done. We started calling them PENTA-1, and we're now on to PENTA-20. So we've now done 20 large studies through this organization. From the very first study looking at AZT monotherapy and when to start that, through to some studies that I'll talk about later. But as well as doing clinical studies on efficacy and toxicity, we've also always tried to do work to bring in science. And so we have a research platform, and I'm just going to briefly talk to you in this talk about HIV cure, because this research platform is really building on the network that we've now developed to allow us to explore this exciting new area that many of you know a lot about, which is whether or not we can actually achieve an HIV cure. So just to give you an idea of what we're currently doing, PENTA-17, otherwise called SMILE, is just about, it has started, and it's really having a look at whether or not we can simplify regimes for our older aged children. And I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but really just to say that there are now a range of medicines on the market that we can use and put together to help simplify medication for our children. And so we're recruiting 300 infected children, and we will randomize them to standard therapy, but also the NRTI sparing, an NRTI sparing regime. And again, this is a study that will utilize, do sub-studies. So we're looking at pharmacokinetics, we're looking at mitochondrial toxicity, virological and lipid profiles. And as with all of our studies, we choose centers that are most able to participate in any particular study. So clearly we're looking in this case for countries that have a number of older age children who might benefit from having a simplified antiretroviral therapy regime. We're also we've just kicked off another study, which is called PENTA-20 or Odyssey, where we're looking at whether or not we can use the newly introduced integrase inhibitor dolutegravir, and we're looking at it both as first-line and second-line therapy. And so in all, we will recruit nearly 700 children around the world to see how these therapies compare with standard of care. And the reason we think it's worthwhile doing is because we really do want to improve our first-line treatment for children, getting highly efficacious regimes with low toxicity, low cross-resistance, and that taste better than some of our other drugs, such as lopinavir. And also, we've got these tablets are rather nice and small, which makes life much easier for us to introduce them to our population. Many of you will know the very encouraging efficacy studies that have been done in adults showing that dolutegravir may be superior to raltegravir when combined with optimized background therapy. And this is just showing you that formulations are really very palatable for our children to take. We're including a number of sub-studies. There's an immunology virology sub-study because there's some interesting data suggesting that integrase inhibitors may be more successful at increasing CD4 counts than in standard of care. And we're particularly interested in thymic output as being a reason why you may end up with better CD4 reconstitution. We're also interested in pharmacokinetic studies with anti-tuberculous therapy, and we're also looking at a number of areas of virological dynamics because this is also an important area to study with this population. I'm not going to go into any great detail about that. But again, as with our other studies, we do these studies across the world, and because we want first-line therapy as well as second-line therapy, then we will be recruiting from sub-Saharan Africa, where they've still got a number of children who are antiretroviral therapy naive. And as well as our antiretroviral therapy, I mentioned that we've expanded our network of activities to include other pediatric infectious diseases, and we've been very successful at attracting funding for these from both the EU and from pharma. And there's just a list of the sort of studies that we've got going on, including neonatal studies, preparing for epidemics, for combating gram-negative infections with novel molecules, and we've recently also are involved in looking at new epidemics such as Zika virus. We've established, obviously, a different network of organizations to do some of these studies because we needed a number of neonatal centers, but we've been very successful at being able to recruit them. So these are just a few of the areas that we're now involved in, that we're no longer just an HIV organization, but really a pediatric study organization focusing particularly on infectious diseases, but also in some other areas. And you can see here that our funding comes from a range of organizations, the EU, from pharma, but also now that PENTA Foundation is a legal entity, it does allow PENTA to also contribute to these studies, and that's been extremely helpful at getting them started. So just to give you an idea of some of the non-HIV studies we're involved in, this is a study called NEO-MERO, and the idea was looking at the pharmacokinetics, efficacy and safety of meropenem in infants of less than 90 days. And again, this has been a successful study rolled out across Europe, and we're currently analyzing the results of this study. And this just shows you, this was actually towards the end of the study period, where it shows you how widespread the centers were. Again, we select the centers based on how able they are to recruit patients for the particular study that we want to do. We've just published on an interesting study, very pertinent to adolescents, called Breather, or PENTA-16, where we looked at whether or not, if you had a break of 2 days off in your 7-day regime, whether there was any reduction in the efficacy of the study of the drugs. We recruited nearly 200 patients who were randomized to either continue their standard therapy or to have a weekend off therapy, and we showed that there was no difference in the number of people who were failing therapy, and there was definitely no evidence of any non-inferiority compared with standard of care. Now, these were obviously highly well-controlled individuals, and so we can't say that everyone should be able to have a weekend off, but if you're well-controlled, what this study shows is it can potentially give people a break from their medication. And it's extremely popular. We had a sub-study looking at acceptability of the study, and it really shows that our patients really enjoy being able to have a weekend off. And then finally, I just want to touch upon our research platform. As with many other organizations and research groups, we're interested in trying to understand better how we can either control patients' HIV without antiretroviral therapy, or indeed achieve a cure. And so we've established an organization with expertise from our research, our recruitment sites, with mathematical modelers and a number of scientists working in a range of areas across the world to try and maximize the effort for this venture in pediatrics. We're particularly interested in patients who either stopped therapy or started therapy late, trying to understand the dynamics both immunologically and virologically, and we've managed to identify a number of cohorts across the world that can help us with this, as well as establishing new cohorts. And this is just a very busy slide showing you that with the range of organizations we've got across the world, we can now move samples and cells from around the world to centralize and maximize the opportunity for understanding the molecular basis of HIV control in children, with the idea of being able to improve management in the not too distant future. I think finally, not quite finally, but nearly finally, we've also established a very successful training program for teaching people around the world about HIV and indeed infectious diseases, particularly TB and hepatitis. And you can see from those the dots that we've done this now in most continents, and we're doing a lot of work at the moment in areas where there's still an increase in HIV, such as in parts of Eastern Europe and in Russia. So that's a very active area for us. And we're also interested in pregnancy and trying to gather evidence-based dose recommendations for antiretroviral therapies to be used in pregnancy. And again, this has been a very successful venture. So in summary, we've now a very large organization, PENTA-ID network. We've got the foundation, the non-profit legal entity, which runs many of the studies. We've now got this newly established PENTA-ID innovation for doing commercial studies. We've got a governance structure which is now very well established to allow us to work with clinical trials units, our executive committee, trial steering committees, and the PENTA and PENTA-ID networks, which now cover more than 50 sites and 100 partners throughout the world. So we're very well set up for doing future studies, working with pharma, and to really drive forward the pediatric agenda. So PENTA, having started off with really just a loose collection of interested people, is now a large organization that covers a number of areas, and we're well equipped, we feel, to contribute to any studies or initiatives that people want us to try to improve treatment of patients with HIV. And clearly that fits into the aging agenda, because we're looking after children from when they're first born until they become adults. So I'll stop at that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigel. This is tremendously impressive. I think that I will have two questions to you. One is, how do you logistically manage this huge network? I think that's a real challenge. And the other is that if you look at all of this wide variety of activities, where would you see the biggest challenge for PENTA in general? So what is it that keeps you busy the most, or keeps you thinking the most? But I think that we can put those questions for the end, if you agree with that suggestion. And I'd like to, Anna, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hello. So I would like to introduce Anna to you, who comes from Romania, and she's been living with HIV since her childhood, and she will speak about her experience, what it means to grow up and to live with HIV, which is very interesting, especially for me as a person with HIV who was infected at later age as an adult. I'm really interested in listening to your experience. So take it away, Anna, please.
Thank you so much, but it seems like I have some problem with my internet connection, so I don't really know that I will be able to change the slides. So I will try to fix it. Just a second.
Okay.
Okay. And yeah, it's not working, but anyway, I will start with my story. An HIV diagnosis is difficult no matter how old you are, and for some people it can be devastating. I know, because so it was for me. So as you introduced me already, my nickname actually is Anna, and I found out that I'm HIV positive in 2007 at the age of 17. This person that you are all hearing now has developed over the years. After the diagnosis, I was trying to find a way to live with the disease. I knew nothing about HIV and AIDS. Well, I knew that it's an awful thing, and it will kill you. Maybe because of that, one of my first questions was related to the life expectancy. In 2007, the life expectancy was 45, or at least that's what the doctors told me, and it got stuck to my brain for years and years. At that time, it's still the most important question that I could ask. After a TB, herpes simplex 1 and candida diagnosis, the HIV diagnosis was the cherry on the cake, and actually a relief, because finally they found out what I had. At that time, as I was a virgin, it is not certain how I contracted the virus, but the doctors assumed that I had been infected while I was a child, as you for sure heard about the major nosocomial HIV epidemic that Romania experienced at the end of the 80s. There have been lots of ups and downs, both emotionally and physically. Somehow, I have always found the strength to overcome these challenges. Like most of the people who are living now with HIV, I had many questions. When am I going to die? Will I ever be able to have a partner or to have a family? How will my friends, my colleagues, my family react when they find out about my HIV status? Are there any other people just like me? And no one, absolutely no one, was able to answer these questions that were tormenting me. After the diagnosis, I immediately started the antiretroviral treatment, as my CD4 count was 1, and I also started to read and learn more about HIV and AIDS. Coming from a medium-sized town from the south of Romania, finding an out-of-the-closet person living with HIV was a bit hard. Now, when I'm thinking of this, I'm sure my life would have been different if I had had the support of one of my HIV peers. However, I consider myself lucky, as I had the support of my family and my friends. But most of the newly diagnosed HIV youngsters don't have this luck. It was very difficult for my mom to cope with my diagnosis, as she knew about HIV that it would kill me. Regardless what we knew about HIV at that time, my mom and I never thought to drop the school, although the master insisted to take 1 year to recover myself. We knew, my mom and I, that I have to continue with my life as planned before finding out I'm HIV positive. My plans were to go to the uni and to finish a master, and so it happened. Maybe, if I was diagnosed when I was a child, the situation would have been totally different, and maybe my mom would have taken the decision to stay at home and spend my last years. After reading more about HIV and AIDS, I found out about ARAS, Romanian Association Against AIDS, and in 2011, I became one of their peer educators, and I got involved in the prevention sector. Step by step, information acquired, almost all my fears related to HIV have diminished over the years. I knew that if I will take my medication diligently, I could live a long, healthy life. Whenever I'm talking about my journey as a young person living with HIV, I always bring luck into the subject. So it happened with my art. Initially, I started with Combivir and Socrin, and after that, I switched to Kivexa and Socrin. I do experience some side effects, but compared to the benefits of the treatment, the side effects are minor. Unfortunately, my HIV peers have faced lots of side effects and have changed lots of formulations, which easily leads to problems related to adherence. Also because most of the young people in Romania were infected through nosocomial infection during the communism years, those that had the luck to survive experienced the treatment fatigue. And because when we talk about aging with HIV, we need to talk about stigma and discrimination as well. HIV-related stigma and discrimination continue to be one of the biggest challenges that the person living with HIV has to face. Personally, I would have wanted to work in the army if I wouldn't have been diagnosed with HIV. But having it, this is not possible according to the Romanian laws. However, in order to not fully give up on my dreams, I have a master's degree on security and defense studies. Of course, the discrimination and stigma is everywhere. Even if we talk about the healthcare system, not once I was discriminating at this dentist, trying to justify themselves that they don't have special equipment for treating me. The same issue that is in most of the European countries. I always find it strange when we are attending the different conferences and workshops that we are mainly talk about the vulnerable groups, but isn't it all the population exposed to this infection? Maybe we should start focusing more on the fact that all the human population can be affected by HIV. Whenever I'm disclosing my status, I often hear, but you're smart and pretty, or are you kidding me? People find it strange that a 28-year-old white heterosexual woman has HIV, and this is because some people still think that HIV affects only gays, IDUs, sexual workers, or African people. Of course, that an HIV positive diagnosis does not mean that you have to give to your relationship and sex but dating continues being one of the most difficult parts in my life. Well, maybe not dating, but keeping a long-term relationship with an HIV-negative partner may be quite challenging, maybe not more than for the others. Although HIV was never the reason for which the relationship ended, it was for sure been one of the factors that led to it. I tried to be forthcoming with my partners and disclose my status on the first hand, and in that moment I can see that they back off because they are afraid. Of course, this fear comes from the fact that they don't have enough information about HIV and how it's transmitted. Most of them, they are thinking that condoms are not safe enough, not to mention that they have never heard about treatment as prevention. Maybe that now, when PrEP is becoming more and more popular, this will become less and less of an issue. However, PrEP is not yet available in Romania. The perspective of having children as being a person with HIV is also an issue, at least for me. The fact that there is even a tiny chance that I can transmit the HIV to the baby. The fact that I cannot conceive the baby in the old school way, all these medical controls, all the discussions, all the struggle, all the planning, all this made me to take the decision that I don't want to have children, at least at this moment in my life. Another subject that deserves even a bigger focus is talking about being undetectable. An education on the specifics on HIV as it is today, including the meaning of being undetectable, should be mandatory reading for everyone, regardless of their status, because it can get tiring to explain to a possible partner that having HIV with a HIV-positive person who is undetectable is not risky, of course, while maintaining the treatment. And this education should start from the health providers. Now I'm not worrying about dying prematurely. I have started to be a bit more concerned about how the body will react to a long-term exposure to the antiretroviral treatment. Lastly, when we are talking about aging with HIV, regardless our age, we should focus more on our well-being and the positive attitude. I would be lying if I say that I don't have my days off when I'm sad and scared, but I have learned to embrace my HIV status and to make a difference on the lives of the young people. And because I know that most of the people, they are asking themselves whether or on how to talk with a new diagnosed HIV person, I can say that there is no universal definition on how to talk with a person that has HIV. Firstly, educate yourself about the infection, what is HIV, how it's transmitted, how it's treated, and how people can stay healthy living with HIV. Maybe when everyone will understand that HIV is not a life-threatening infection, in that moment everything will be easier. Encourage them to take their treatment even though they might experience side effects. Be open to HIV discussions, but also understand they might not always be open to them. Talk about the things that you were talking before the diagnosis. They are the same person in the end. Thank them because they trusted you in disclosing their diagnosis. Regarding the health providers, don't discriminate. We all know that this is happening, at least in Romania. Be honest with your patient. Educate the patient about HIV infection. Anticipate the patient's access to extensive information in the community, some of which is seriously outdated or simply wrong. Guide the patient to trusted NGOs, websites, and offer them support groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. This was, you took my breath away. This was really, really a great testimonial. And my question to you will then be, how do you actually cope then with stigma? How can you provide or convey this strength and this momentum that you displayed in your speak or in your talk to your peers? And with that, I would like to open the floor to other questions and to free interaction. If you have any comments or any questions, then please go ahead now. And while you are thinking and typing away your questions, so Otilia, what do you think? How do you think we can overcome these inconsistencies across Europe in terms of the current situation, the current epidemiological situation? I know that the ECDC has been doing a lot, but what do you think we can do more?
Thank you, Tamás. Thank you to all the other speakers. It was really interesting to follow the discussion and the presentation. As I said, in general, in European Union, we are performing well, at least in terms of preventing mother-to-child transmission. But still, even in this area, although we are under WHO targets, there are still areas, hot areas in Europe where efforts should be done to prevent remaining ongoing transmission, and to align the efforts. What ECDC at least can do is to foster the dialogue between countries, to understand what is being done in a very good way in some countries and what can be improved in other countries. We try to collect the knowledge. We try to map policies and practices for antenatal screening for mother-to-child transmission prevention in European Union countries through a survey which is already published, and we use a tool which is called an expert group and a summary of evidence to understand how actually the policymakers can adapt their antenatal screening policies to the pattern of the epidemic in their countries. And what is left to be addressed is actually those pregnant women which are HIV positive and they have the best chance to deliver a healthy child, but for this they need to have access to good antenatal care and to all these prevention interventions which are possible. And I would really like to encourage our late speaker from Romania that there are extremely good techniques now which makes the delivery of a healthy child possible. We also have to understand how we can attract to antenatal screening and care the pregnant women from high-risk group that can become HIV positive during the pregnancy through high-risk behavior, through injecting drug use, or through having partners who have high-risk exposures. We also need to attract the pregnant women from migrant background who may have not access to antenatal care if they are not documented and may have not access to antenatal care services in a country. So this is about prevention of mother-to-child transmission. For the other part, which was reflected in my talk, was actually this increasing trend of transmission among the young MSM. And it is really sad to see how young boys from 15 to 19 years old, they actually follow the same increasing, accelerating transmission, which is overall in Europe. We know that in Europe, HIV epidemic is highly concentrated in MSM population, and unfortunately, some of these young MSM, obviously they have sex with infected persons, and maybe they are not aware of the risk they're exposed to when they have unsafe sex, and maybe they don't have access to PrEP, and we know that actually access to PrEP is very limited, and this is what ECDC is trying now to support and understand the evidence and motivate the policymakers to do. And we also know that the adolescents are more vulnerable in general to sexually transmitted infections biologically, and also because they are not yet powerful enough to negotiate safe sex practices.
Sure. Thank you. I would like to ask our Arcadine moderator, Laurent, can you please turn my screen to a presenter screen so that I can see the questions, because right now I don't see the questions, so that I can relay them to the audience and to the speakers. And while this is happening, I would like to ask Nigel and also Otilia and also Anna, if you see the questions on your screen. Okay, it's happening now. Great. Is there anything that you feel that amongst the questions that you would like to answer, or can we just go ahead with the ones I asked?
Unfortunately, Tamás, I cannot see the questions.
Oh, you can't see the questions. Okay.
No.
Nigel, are you there?
Yeah, I can't see the questions, but I can answer the ones that you you started.
Great.
So, no, I think that your first question, I think I can answer by saying we're very fortunate to have a fantastic team of people across Europe who take on particular aspects of the study. We share it around. I mean, from being a very ashamed Brit about our country's vote for Brexit, if they saw the way we operate as a network, I think they would be hugely impressed by how we just work as a team and we make sure that everyone contributes in one way or another to all of these studies. And sometimes people have taken on a study for the first time as a PI, but it's been very educational for them, and we give people the support. And so, doing it this way, we're also, as well as managing a large number of activities, it also allows us to help train the next generation of people to come through and be able to do this when we're no longer around. So one of them is by distributing the work across Europe and across sites to make sure that we can do all of these studies. I think in terms of future challenges, the big challenge now is finding more and more of our population are either in places that we don't have the resources to influence. So they're in very remote areas, and so that's the reason why they haven't received treatment. And that becomes more and more expensive to then recruit that population into new studies. So I think that's going to be the big challenge for us is how do we effectively, cost effectively, carry on doing the studies that we want to do as we treat more and more people successfully, which is one of the reasons I think why we're spending more and more time in some of the more, as well as doing some of the basic work in introducing simpler regimes, ART regimes. We're also tackling some of the now prevalent problems such as antibiotic resistance, and also thinking about some of the cutting-edge work, such as the cure agenda.
All right, thank you very much. I can see one question which is directed to Anna. It says, I read it out for you. Thank you for the talk, Anna. It was really interesting. We find with our work at Chiva that young people gain a lot of support meeting up with other young people living with HIV. Do you now have opportunities to meet with other people your age with HIV, and how easy is this in Romania at all? Does this make a difference if these young people have also grown up with HIV like you? So this was asked by one of the participants from Chiva. What's your reflection on that?
Thank you for the question. Well, I told you that I'm coming from a medium size. So currently I'm living in Bucharest, and here I can meet HIV people, I mean like peers, whenever I'm going to the hospital to take my treatment. Other than that, I don't have any friends living with HIV. It was very difficult to find any open people living with HIV in my town. I'm just going at the hospital, seeing them and saying hello to them, but that's all, you know. I'm approaching them sometimes, saying that I'm working for ARAS, and I'm trying to give more information to them and encourage them, actually, because they don't have all the information that I have. But I cannot say that they are giving me support, you know, or that I'm feeling better because I know them. I think that it's easier for them knowing that I'm doing well and that I can help them with all the information that I have now. So then again, I'm lucky to work in this field.
Yeah, so you don't have a formal network or any kind of special organization for younger people living with HIV?
It was something, but for children living with HIV, no, as far as I know.
All right, thank you. Actually, our time is up. So with that, I would like to ask you, our presenters, do you have any last comments that you would like to make to close this webinar?
Well, only really just a thank you from me for this opportunity, and it's been a real pleasure hearing my co-speakers, particularly Anna. It's fantastic to hear from her. We, from some of our sub-studies, we recognise how much we learn by talking to young people, and it does, I can assure her that we take on board her comments and similar comments from other young people, and it helps direct our agenda of the work that we do.
Thank you too.
The same from my side. I would like to express my consideration from EATG for organizing this webinar.
Well, I have to thank you for being here and for talking to us. And please don't forget that the webinar recording will be uploaded and available on the agingwithhiv.com website and also on www.eatg.org, which is the EATG's website. And also, with this, I once again would like to announce the upcoming second conference in the Aging with HIV project, which is going to be held in Bucharest next January. And with this, I would like to say goodbye to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us and for listening in. And a huge thank you to our presenters. And I hope to keep in touch with all of you. Goodbye now.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the conference call. Thank you all for your participation. You may now disconnect.